conference, right, with the speaker, Dr. Richard Fry, and I have that information on my notes here, happening November 2nd at One Health Center, and we'll get the details because I'm stumbling all over trying to read and not look. So, good morning, ladies. Thank you for being in here.
Thank you for having us.
Good to see you. So tell me about the progress we've made with autism since we've met before.
Yes.
So has there been any progress? And I guess there's two ways to ask it, globally and locally. Is there anything locally that's changed?
Well, locally that's changed. We've been around for 8.5 years. We offer 20-plus programs and services. We're hoping to expand to a larger facility. So that's a good thing. When I have a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old on the spectrum, and I also have a 10-year-old on the spectrum. When we started Outreach Autism Services Network, there were no services. So what's changed locally is we're filling that gap. And as far why don't you talk about some of the stuff with the medical?
I was going to talk about the science. So you brought up science. You know, how is science changing in autism? And I guess the big question is, have they discovered the reason? Well, why do we have autism? Why is autism increasing? And the answer is no, they have not discovered the reason, but they're getting closer. There's so many new discoveries coming out. There was one just recently that talked about the immune system in autism and how in the brains of these autistic children, when they, post-mortem, when they look at the brains, they can see a certain type of immune cell inside the brains which show that these children are actually dealing with inflammation. This is not just a behavioral disorder, but this is actually a medical disorder. And they're finding this more and more. The evidence is coming out that there's something involved with the immune system with the children with autism. And that's not actually what our conference is about at this point, because this science is new, but our conference is about something that's well known, and that's the fact that children with autism most of the time have comorbid medical conditions. They say that the average amount is about 4 comorbid medical conditions for every child that has a diagnosis of autism. And those conditions can be anything like seizures, gastrointestinal illnesses, things like ADHD, mitochondrial disorders, mast cell activation disorders,
MTHFR, yes.
And genetic. A lot of those things are going to be way over my head. I have one question, though, about the word morbid. That sounds like it's... Well, what does that mean, actually?
A comorbid condition just means that it occurs at the same time along with another diagnosis.
Oh, that's all it means?
That's all it means.
Okay.
That's all it means. No, it doesn't mean death or lethal or anything like that.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
The problem with children with autism, especially those who are nonverbal, is often after they get the diagnosis of autism, the medical tests stop, and they don't look for these other conditions, even though they're very common. And if you have a child who, especially a nonverbal child, and even sometimes a verbal child with autism, they have difficulty with communication. So they may have difficulty saying, Mom, Dad, I can't poop, or Mom, Dad, my tummy hurts, or, I have headaches all the time, and there's pain behind my eyes.
Even if they're verbal, sometimes they have a hard time.
They may not be able to express all this, and instead, they may scream, they may hit their heads.
Do we know why they don't communicate that? They're not. It wouldn't be like a child that my own child would not be shy with me, but he might be shy with you.
Yes.
So is it that? But it can't be shyness, right? Talking to mom and dad.
Well, this is where we feel like the inflammation, this is the new science that's coming out, and we feel, or at least I'll say I feel, that eventually we're going to find out this inflammation is causing these issues where it's making them scream, and once the inflammation comes down, then you can put the therapies into place, such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, applied behavioral analysis, but until you get these underlying medical conditions into play, you won't be able to work with language, you won't be able to work with educating the child, potty training, all of these important things.
So the official answer to your question is nobody knows. Why can the children not communicate? They don't know yet, but they do know there's certain medical conditions that they can treat and the children will communicate. Exactly. I'll give you one example. Dr. Fry will definitely talk about this. Cerebral folate deficiency. They tested a whole cohort of autistic children and they found out that a certain percentage of them had an antibody to the folate receptor in their brain, so they couldn't absorb folate. So they took the children that had this abnormality and they gave them a very, very high dose of folinic acid, which is kind of like folic acid, it's just a little bit
It's broken down to a
broken
more-
down so you can digest,
Exactly.
use it more readily.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they gave a certain cohort of children that had these antibodies, this folinic acid. And after a period of time, many of the younger children, it didn't work as well with the older children, but many of the younger children began to speak and lost their autism diagnosis.
My
because
gosh, wow.
They had a medical condition that was treated. Now, that's not going to work with every single
Tell
child
them about
with
the
autism.
woman that came from 6.5 hours away.
So we had a doctor who came to OSIN to speak on cerebral folate deficiency.
And what is OSIN? Explain.
Outreach
Outreach
Autism
Autism
Services
Services
Network,
Network.
sorry.
Okay,
That's our
okay.
acronym.
Okay.
We brought a doctor into Outreach Autism Services Network, Dr. Sri Ganeshan.
Ganeshan.
Okay.
And he's,
Yeah.
and he spoke on cerebral folate deficiency. And we had a mom who drove down from Pensacola, so she drove 6.5 hours, and went back to her pediatrician in Pensacola and said, I heard this doctor speak about this cerebral folate deficiency. Can you check my child for this antibody? So the pediatrician said, sure, it can't hurt. It's just a blood test. No, I think it's a cheek swab test.
Yeah,
it's
cheek
not-
swab. It's a cheek swab. Yeah.
No, that one's a blood test.
Is it? The mito swab
The
is-
mitochondrial
yeah,
one is the
yeah.
cheeks. Yeah, get them confused. Anyway, it's a blood test. So she did the blood test on the child. Sure enough, the child had those antibodies, and the pediatrician treated the child as the doctor had suggested. And now the child, he's not verbal, but he's communicating with an iPad. He's never been able to communicate before, and he's starting to.
He's
have
pre-verbal. He's pre-verbal.
Starting to have some pre-verbal
Wow.
abilities, and
Yes.
and he's 7 or 8. He wasn't one of these younger kids. They say if they can catch it when they're 3 or 4. they can turn
So,
it around.
okay, what you've said kind of answers a question I had, which would have been, but you kind of answered it. Do the comorbid conditions actually cause the autism? And it sounds like maybe sometimes they do.
I think in that case, the comorbid conditions cause some of the symptoms of autism. So in that case, this comorbid condition, cerebral folate deficiency, can cause a child to be nonverbal, which is a symptom of autism, a difficulty with communication.
Okay,
That's
okay.
one of the symptoms. And let me give you another example. There was a child, this wasn't one that's related to us, this one, another one I know, not with Outreach Autism Services Network, who was beating himself, beating himself, and it bruises everywhere,
Pretty common.
just bruises.
Wow,
This is
wow.
a very common symptom of autism, and they have medications, psychotropic medications that they give the children so they'll stop beating themselves.
But it doesn't
This
help with the
child
underlying condition.
Doesn't really
Turned
address the
out-
problem.
it-
Okay.
It turned out that this child had, and I'm not going to remember, but it was a gastrointestinal illness, might have been
Oh my gosh.
IBS or something
And
like
they don't
that.
check for that?
Well, it's hard to know. If you have a nonverbal child, how do you know that he's beating himself?
Okay,
This is the
okay.
problem.
Because he's in
Okay.
pain. So they gave the child medicine, and guess what? The child stopped beating himself, very happy, and able to
Can I
enjoy
ask a
life.
question? If the symptoms of autism are gotten rid of, what's a good word, or erased,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't therefore the autism go away? I mean, if the symptoms are gone, isn't the autism gone?
Technically, if you can't meet the 3 criteria for autism, which is difficulty communication, repetitive behaviors, and social difficulties, if you don't have those 3, then you don't have autism.
So you can
yeah,
technically
that's-
lose an autism diagnosis.
You can.
Okay,
It's
okay.
rare because you would have to lose all 3 of, you would have to find the root cause of all 3 of those
Yeah.
things, and you would have to, remediate it. So it is rare, but I personally know people who have lost an autism diagnosis.
So when you're having this conference, these are for the caretakers, the grandparents, and the parents to attend?
We also have a track for medical professionals. So we have doctors who will be speaking to other doctors and nurses and other medical professionals from Ocala, from this area, to, and actually Alachua County too, to speak to them about these comorbid medical conditions, just to make them aware. Because there's been a lot of research in the last 10 or 15 years, and they may not be aware. For another example is seizures in autism. There's a type of seizure called electrostatic something of sleep. It's ESES. Can't remember the exact what it stands for. But if that, you can only find it on an EEG while the child's sleeping. There's no outside
Oh,
sign
really?
that they're having seizures. And that particular type of abnormality on an EEG can cause a child to lose their words. So they could speak and now they can't speak. A lot of times a child
Wow.
will get a diagnosis with autism when it could be an underlying seizure disorder. But if a doctor doesn't know about it, they're not going to know to look for
So
it.
that's one of the big things, is we really want the medical community coming out. So if there's any doctors or nurses or anyone in your audience listening, please have doctors come. It's only $25 to come. If you don't have $25 or you don't want to give us $25, we'll sponsor you. We want these medical professionals there. We want the families there because the families need to learn how to advocate for their child, and the doctors need to understand that these are good tests that need to be run, and that there's doctors, Dr. Rosignol, Dr. Bowles, Dr. Cartzenell, Dr. Berger. We also have locally Dr. Hall. We have Debbie Donahue is an ARNP, and we also have Dr. Elyman that will be speaking, and we want them to hear it, not from us. We want them to hear it from the doctors
And tell
themselves,
us
that these are important tests that need to be run. And so that's what we want them to learn at this conference, is what tests they need to be looking for and what they can do to help further assist the parents and the children.
Take a moment and give the nuts and bolts of this, the where, the when, the why, and then we'll get back onto the conversation. Somebody tuning in right now, they got to get out of their car. So tell that information, where, when, and why. And not why, but where, when, and I guess just where and when, right?
The OSA Neuromedical Conference is going to be Saturday, November 2nd at One Health Center, which is on the corner of 17th and Easy Street at 1714 Southwest 17th Street, Ocala, Florida. And if they want more information, they can visit our website at oasn.info or give us a call, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 462-0168, and Carolina will be happy to assist you.
Very good.
And some of the medical professionals, some of their professions are pediatric neurology, pediatric psychiatry, and functional medicine that you sent us the information on.
Yes.
So the average person who hears that autism might be caused by inflammation is right away going to go get some anti-inflammatories of some sort, right?
Yes, and that's why I tried to clarify that. This conference is about the known science, not the proposed science. The fact that autism is caused by inflammation is becoming more and more a focus of research, but it's not something yet that they've established to the point where they can say, go get your kids some Motrin. You know, it's not at that it's not at that point yet.
Okay, so the question would be, but maybe it's too early to ask it, what would be the cause of the inflammation? But if it's not even sure that that's what's causing it.
It's too early to decide.
Look, what they're seeing is changes in the immune system. So they're thinking that it comes from the immune system, something that has to do with the immune system. In fact, there is a mouse model of autism. So when they want to study autism in mice, they create the autism in the mouse using something called the maternal immune activation model. And you can actually Google this. How do I make a maternal immune activation model, mouse model of autism? And what they do is they take a pregnant mouse and they inject the pregnant mouse with a certain type of virus, I don't know what kind, and it causes this immune activation in the mother, and then the baby is born with the mouse version of autism. So if you work in a research lab where they are studying autism, they will very often use the maternal immune activation mouse model of autism to study different different strategies, different medications, whatever they're studying. That's how they'll create the mouse with autism.
There's a lot of children that have autoimmune encephalitis as a comorbid or another condition associated with autism, and so that's where I was coming up with my own opinion about it, but it's not. There's no medical science that's saying that's for sure what's happening, but we do see correlation. I think maybe that.
Right. Yeah. So autoimmune encephalitis can be a comorbid condition with autism. So autoimmune encephalitis, as an actual diagnosis, means that they found an antibody, and that antibody is attacking the brain in some way, and they can measure that antibody, and then they will treat the child with immune suppressants to get rid of the antibody so that it will stop attacking the brain. So that is a particular condition that can be comorbid with autism, but it's a very small, it's a very rare condition.
Does the new information and does the study, the larger study, help the parents like yourselves understand what's in the future for your children? I mean, that's one of the things we all want, is our children to have a good future, right? Is their future improved? Is their life going to be better because of what we're talking about today?
I think that just what we know now, as far as the comorbid conditions, that we can improve the lives of children with autism just by what I said. If
just
they've got
some of them anyway,
gastrointestinal problems,
and most of them have
fixing that to get rid of their pain. If they've got continual headaches, find out what's the cause of the headaches and, remediate that. Treating some of these if they've got seizures, definitely if they've got seizures, fix the seizures and you might see a lot of improvement in the behaviors. Just by treating what we now know are comorbid conditions in autism, the children can have better lives. Now, of course, there needs to be medical investigations for each of these things to see, is this particular child's problem? Because not all children are going to have seizures, not all children will have gastrointestinal illnesses, though the percentages are actually pretty high. They're above 50% for both of those.
And putting the medical aside, just early intervention is key, and so anyone that has suspicion that their child may have autism, please contact our office, please contact the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, please contact early steps. These are things that we can do to help out with therapies, but if you're looking at doing the testing and the therapies and looking at getting the diagnosis all at the same time, this is where you look at the better outcomes. And so we really want to see these kids that, I can speak for my own sons that are now 14 and 15, they were completely nonverbal, they were hard of hearing, very behaviorally challenged, and we found out that they have a condition called MTHFR, which is a gene mutation that can cause you not be able to methylate B vitamins. And is it just B or is it all?
Folic acid.
Yeah.
I think it's B vitamins.
Yeah.
So tell me more. Your children are improved now because of that discovery?
Because of that discovery, and also because of other therapies that are put into place. And so
Diet, changing their diet.
Diet changes, whole, good food, most processed food has folic acid in it, and folic acid is toxic for an individual that has MTHFR gene mutation. And so both my husband and I have it, and my three sons have it. And so just taking that out, not having that toxic folic acid for us, we take it in a methylated state. We take something called methylfolate. We take a multivitamin with methylated vitamins in it. And so that to me has been huge. But then we also have applied behavioral analysis. We've had speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, all of these things that they all kind of marry together, and that's what causes the better outcomes. It's just like the puzzle pieces. There isn't just one thing that you say, okay, well, this is it, and this is going to make the child better. You have to get all of these things into place all at the same time, and you have to have parents that are open to all these interventions. And once you see that, you will see children that will have amazing outcomes, and it's going to be different for every single child. One child may not become verbal, but they might be able to communicate through an iPad. But then another one, like my two older boys, 14 and 15, they are completely verbal now, and they're getting straight A's with supports in place.
Wow.
So these are kids that we were told would never leave the house, and that they would not be verbal. And these boys are completely verbal, and I truly believe they will leave the house and do their own thing. And if not, we'll get a bigger house, and they can be, a little bit more dependent with us. But whatever it is, they have better outcomes than what the doctors told us when they were 2 and 3. When we initially were going to doctors and asking for help, we were given no hope. And that's what we're all about, is giving hope to families. And so we want them to know that there are tests that they can look for, that they can go through our autism behavioral education program, where we link families with the basic behavioral plan, and we get them long-term therapy in their home, in the community, and in the school in some cases. These are the things that we need to do. We need to work collectively to get these things into place. But you have to get the medical first. The child is not ready to receive these interventions. They are going to take longer to do well from these interventions. If you have your stomach hurting and someone's trying to get you to learn how to talk, you're going to go scream and rock in the corner. You're not going to be ready to learn how to talk.
Absolutely, sure.
You are not going to be ready to be educated, so we have to get that into place. So that's what we want parents to know, and that's what we want medical professionals to know. Let's test all these kids for these underlying conditions. If all of them don't have it, that's okay, but even if 5 had it, wouldn't that be amazing?
We've
changed 5 lives, and that's what it's all about. Everything that we do, if we help one person on the radio today, I can sleep well at night because I did my job, and I know what it's like, and Anne-Marie knows what it's like to go through this, because we have children with autism, so we want to give hope, and we want to give answers to families, and that's what we're here to do. In the clinical side of it, these doctors will present that on November 2nd.
And another reason for having the conference is to possibly draw other medical professionals in our community to set up their offices and their programs. That way people won't have to go out of town or out of state for some things.
We would love that. We want more research done here, meaningful research, and we want clinics that understand all the underlying conditions and that they have to test the children for these things and adults as well. And we need them to accept Medicaid and healthy kids because most of the families we serve are low income. And so they can't afford to go to a doctor that doesn't work with insurance companies, and those are $1,000 to $2,000 an hour, and that's not reasonable. And so we need to have doctors that can do all of this with state-sponsored insurance, because then you'll enable these families to be able to move forward. Their child will be doing better, and then they can move off of state-sponsored insurance in time. Parents can get back to working. You can't work when you have a child that's having all these behavioral issues, medical issues. That's your number one job. And so finding the underlying medical causes can also have an impact on the family income too. It can help with keeping the marriage together. There's all sorts of things that can be done. There's a 90% divorce rate amongst parents of children with special needs. So we want to do everything we can to unify and to make sure that these children are medically and therapeutically taken care of.
And you also provide support group for the parents and the caregivers of the children as well, because they also need support and positiveness.
We just started a support meeting forum over at Advent Health recently, and so we're also meeting at their pediatric, what is it called now?
It's the therapy center. I don't know its official
It's the
name.
Speech and Hearing Center that used to be
Language Therapy
MRMC. Now it's
Sure.
So we're doing that monthly. I haven't got the date for our next meeting, but it should be right before Thanksgiving, I think. And so we're looking to be able to grow our relationship on the southeast side of town with Advent Health and have parents be able to visit us over there, and then also Wednesdays at our facility as well, from 12 to 1. So.
There's a lot of exciting stuff that you kind of went over and very well. I mean, we have a very good understanding of sort of kind of what's going on in your world. The one thing that comes to mind is, and this is not true, I don't know, but every once in a while you'll hear about an autistic child that has a moment where they don't seem autistic, and the parents or the grandparents, in the case that I'm thinking of, will say, it's weird, every once in a while it doesn't seem like she's got autism at all.
So that's a big clue. So there's a few different ones that I know about. So one is when a child has a fever. Sometimes when a child has a fever, all of a sudden the symptoms of autism will go away.
Isn't that weird?
That's very common. There's been a little bit of research on that. In fact, one of the studies, they tried to imitate that with something that stimulates the heat shock protein. Is actually an extract of broccoli sprouts. So they did a very large study with children with autism because this would imitate the fever response. And they had good response with those particular children. So if you have a child that their autism goes away with a fever, you might want to try broccoli sprout extract. Unfortunately, the broccoli sprout extract that you can buy is not going to be the same that they used.
It's not the clinical dose.
It's not going to be the clinical strength that they used in the study. I don't know if they're following up on that study. I haven't looked into it in a while, but it's very possible that they're going to go through, further trials.
Right.
Usually, if you're trying to establish a new medicine, you have to go through like a phase 1 trial and a phase 2 trial and a phase 3 trial.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're trying to do that with that substance, but I do know what prompted the investigation was the fever response. Another one that I'm very familiar with is the antibiotic response. So some children will take antibiotics and their autism symptoms will go away. That often says that there's something going on in the gut. And there's a doctor, Dr. Adams. We tried to get him to come to the conference.
Next year.
But he's going to another one the week later, so he wouldn't come. So Dr. Adams did a study where he did fecal transplants in children with autism. He actually used an antibiotic called vancomycin, which kills a lot of different, specifically the Clostridia species of bacteria in the gut. So cleanse the gut. And then they did like as if you were going for a colonoscopy, they did like that horrible drink you have to take. They cleanse the gut. And then he did a fecal transplant with a microbiota pill he created from someone else's bacteria from their gut. That was a healthy person. And he gave this substance to several children with autism. I forgot how many were in the study. And some of them lost their autism. Like they no longer presented as autism.
Wow.
And as having autism symptoms. And then 2 years later, he tested these children, and many of them still did not exhibit the signs of autism. Now, not every child did that. Some of them improved, but didn't, get to the point where they would not be considered autistic. It probably Well, I'm not going to say that because I'm just guessing. So anyway, that was
But it's
Dr.
exciting
Adams' study.
research, and
That's
that's why we want to
unbelievably
bring these
exciting.
doctors
No,
here.
that's
Do you have time
awesome.
for one more?
We do have time, yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so one more example of what you were saying is children who are given steroids. Let's say they have asthma, and they're given steroids, and all of a sudden their autism symptoms go away.
Wow.
And then when the steroids are discontinued because the asthma is better, now their
Then it
autism
returns.
symptoms come back.
Yeah.
So that could be a sign that there is some kind of brain inflammation that is causing those symptoms. Or it could even be like a headache pain. We don't know, but something's going on up here
Wow.
that's causing those symptoms.
And that's
I
why you
don't
start
know-
thinking about, it just makes
There's
you
a lot of
makes you
hope.
think.
The
Yeah.
one thing I want to say is that if there's a parent or grandparent or a loved one with an autistic child and it's a new child for you, a new baby, whatever, just been diagnosed, there's a lot of people out there that you can talk to that maybe can give you some help or some guidance. I mean, you two ladies have an unbelievable amount of wealth of knowledge on this subject. So I would recommend going to the event. It's on November 2nd at the One Health Center at 1714 Southwest 17th Street. We will make sure that this gets announced more than this one time here. The registration fee is $25. The registration is from 8:30 till 9. The conference is from 9 till 6:30. The keynote speaker, Dr. Richard Fry. How do we sponsor this? If somebody wanted to sponsor this, it says to sponsor.
They can give a call to our office, or they can check on our website. When you go to the conference, it gives you the option to sign up for the conference, the registration, or
Okay.
you can see about sponsoring. If someone's interested, call us today because we have to get our exhibit space
Give the number
finalized,
again and the
so.
website, please.
The website is O as in Oscar, A as in Apple, S as in Sam, N as in Nancy, .info, and our phone number is 352-462-0168. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
you.
Karen Vega and Anne-Marie Sossong, thank you for the work you do and for taking time to talk to us today. We will make sure that we continue to mention this event. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Midday with Joe coming up in about 14 minutes.